Welcome to week 4 of ecology. I'm your professor, Dr. McAllister, and congratulations for making it to week 4. That is one whole month of ecology. We've covered quite a bit. We started with the complexity of ecology, adaptations to terrestrial and aquatic environments. Then we talked about different biomes on Earth. And now we'll zoom out and think about biodiversity on a global scale. Next week, we have our first exam, so there's no new assignment this week, but you do have finishing up your Perceptive, your review, and your feedback from last week, and you have a discussion board this time on biodiversity. Biodiversity is an important concept because it's a way we can measure the different kinds of living things in any given location. We group those things into species because this is a convenient way of measuring biodiversity. So when we use the species to measure biodiversity, we call this species diversity. In our readings, you'll learn about 500 types of species of fish in Lake Victoria in Africa. It's a hyper-diverse lake system that has been evolving for millions of years, and this has allowed it to have an extremely high number of species. Genetic diversity is an alternative way of defining biodiversity, and it's often used together with species diversity by land managers and conservationists. Genetic diversity is the raw material for adaptation, and a species' future potential for adaptation depends on genetic diversity. Another metric that I often use is functional diversity, which groups organisms based on their characteristics like body size in mammals or beak size in birds, leaf size in plants, as well as other traits that are indicative of the growth, reproductive, and survival strategies. You can imagine an ecosystem with many plant or bird species, but all those species are functionally similar. And that says something about how strong the environment selects for certain types of traits. On the other hand, in an ecosystem with high plant functional diversity, that indicates that there are many ways of being a plant, and that is probably driven by competition for resources like light or water. Finally, another metric that is often used is ecosystem diversity or geodiversity. Geodiversity defines the diversity of physical landforms or physical features of a landscape, and geodiversity is connected to a conservation strategy called conserving nature's stage, which is this idea that if you conserve areas of high geodiversity, so diversity in landscape features like mountainous areas or areas with lots of different soil types or lots of different lakes and rivers, lots of topography, then you will be by default conserving high biodiversity because these areas are biodiversity hotspots. Currently, science has named about 1.5 million species. That's a lot of species, but estimates suggest that the number of named species account for less than 20% of the total number of eukaryote species present on the planet, about 9 million species. That estimate varies a bit, but biologists agree that we have only begun to catalog Earth's diversity. And this is important because we can't conserve what we don't know exists. I like these data visualizations because they demonstrate what groups are least described. Plants, for example, are pretty well described, but invertebrates, insects, poorly described. Here's another focusing on chordates. Okay, remember the group Chordata? They share 5 important features like, for example, a notochord, a dorso-hollow tubular nerve cord, pharyngeal slits. Remember back to your Bio 151. So at some point during the life cycle, they had all of these different features. So this includes us as mammals. We have those pharyngeal slits in the fetal stage, which are of course shared by other groups as well. Mammals are nearly completely described, as you can see. There are still reports of new species of some primates and flying squirrels in places like Madagascar, Africa, South America, Asia, places that tend to be far away from humans, of course. Here is another one that focuses on invertebrates. And you can see in particular that there are a lot of insects that remain to be described, as well as some nematodes, arachnia, etc. Biodiversity is not evenly distributed on Earth. One of the oldest observed patterns in ecology is that species biodiversity in many taxonomic groups like mammals and birds and plants decreases with increasing latitude. In other words, biodiversity is highest closer to the equator. There are many hypotheses proposed to explain this pattern. One hypothesis is that the tropics are older than temperate regions, which were covered in ice during the last glaciation, so the Pleistocene. Another possibility is that the tropics are warmer, and this greater temperature accelerates metabolic and cellular processes, including DNA mutation. Other ideas are that the tropics are more heterogeneous in their environment or more topographically complex, which creates high diversity of habitats or niches that can support more species. Many macroecologists that study ecology at large or global scales agree it's probably due to the influence of all of these factors. Scientists and international organizations recognize many places on Earth and have designated many places on Earth as biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots are areas with high species diversity, and those species are endemic to that region and are at significant risk of species loss. Remember, endemic means that they're unique to that region and only found in that location. So, for example, half of all the endemic species in the world occur in some of these 30 to 35 regions. So these are target areas for conservation. We are closest to the Caribbean biodiversity hotspot, but if you get a chance to travel out west, the California Floristic Province is another region of high endemism, in a large part due to the different geologies and soil types, going back to that concept of geodiversity. The number of species on Earth has changed over geological time, so it's dynamic. Just like the location of entire continents have changed with the makeup of Pangea and the distributions of biomes have changed, the number of species on Earth has changed over time. Paleontologists have identified 5 strata or layers in the fossil record that show sudden and dramatic losses in biodiversity. We call these mass extinctions, and scientists have identified 5 mass extinctions over time. And of course, we believe that we are now in the 6th major mass extinction event on Earth. And presumably that will be detectable in fossil records, say 50 million years from now. The oldest extinction event, the Ordovician, is the first recorded mass extinction and resulted from a period of intense cooling followed by rapid warming. At the time, most species on Earth lived in the ocean. There were very few, if any, land-dwelling species, and estimates are that upwards of 85% of species became extinct, And you can see the scale of the different organisms here compared to primates, which of course primates did not exist at that time. They're just showing you for scale. The Devonian extinction appeared to affect only marine species. So at this time, there are both marine and land-dwelling organisms. So the marine species and the plants or animals inhabiting terrestrial habitats were not affected. So the oceans became anoxic. The causes of this extinction are the least understood. We can tell from fossil records, etc., that the oxygen levels in the marine system dropped, and we believe that is what caused this extinction event. So the Permian extinction was the largest in the history of Earth. Estimates are that Earth lost 96% of all marine species and at least 70% of all terrestrial species. So Earth really became a planet that was devoid of life. It's thought to be caused by asteroids and volcanic activity, which reduce the levels of light. And of course, we know if there's no light, there's no photosynthesis, which generates oxygen for the entire planet. And Earth took 30 million years to recover after this extinction event. It dramatically altered Earth's biodiversity makeup and the course of evolution. The causes of the fourth mass extinction, or the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event, are a bit unclear. And hypotheses include climate change, an asteroid impact, volcanic eruptions. The extinction occurred just before the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea. And this was the first time in Earth's history that dinosaurs existed, and most of which ended up going extinct. The causes of the fifth extinction event, or the Cretaceous extinction event, are the ones that are best understood. This extinction event occurred over 66 million years ago, and this is when dinosaurs, which were the dominant vertebrate group for millions of years, disappeared from the planet, except for one clade that gave rise to birds. So every land animal that weighed more than 25 kilograms, or about 50 pounds, became extinct, and it took Earth about 10 million years to recover. This extinction was caused by the impact of a large asteroid off the coast of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The crater's been buried and eroded away, but there is evidence of the crater ring. And this crater ring has large limestone sinkholes, and geologists working in Haiti, so due east of the Yucatan Peninsula, is where geologists found a large spike in the levels of iridium that were there. And iridium is extraterrestrial, and it was found at the KT boundary. And people in the 80s put forth this idea, and it was greeted with great skepticism. But over time, they found evidence of this iridium spike consistently at this KT boundary. And so it's now a really, really well accepted theory, and it was a super, super exciting discovery at the time. The Pleistocene extinction is one of the smaller extinctions, and it's the most recent one. In North America and Eurasia, megafauna, or large animals, disappeared towards the end of the Pleistocene, which is the last glaciation period, about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. The timing of this coincides with the arrival of humans. And now, of course, we are in the sixth mass extinction event. And this is known as the Holocene or the Anthropocene. And you can see that it coincided with humans. So it started about 1,500 years ago, but if you look at the map, you can see the rise really started at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and the colonization by Europeans. And this is where you can see that we have extinction rates of mammals and birds and reptiles compared to sort of the background levels that are indicated. In the Holocene or the Anthropocene, the dodo bird became extinct around 1662. So it was hunted for its meat by sailors, and it was an easy prey because the dodo did not evolve around humans. So it had never developed a fear mechanism to avoid them. So it would approach people without fear, and it was easy prey. The Steller sea cow, which is related to the manatee, became extinct in 1968 along the northwest coast of North America. Steller sea cow was first discovered by Europeans in 1741. Of course, indigenous people knew about it before that, but Europeans discovered it in 1741, and it was hunted for its meat and oil. And humans killed the last sea cow in 1768. So it took only 27 years between the sea cow's first contact with Europeans and the extinction of the species. And later in the semester, we'll touch a little bit more on indigenous people and how indigenous people are stewards of the environment, and they have been able to maintain biodiversity for thousands of years, whereas it only took Europeans a few decades to drive species to extinction. The last example is a little bit closer to home. And so this one in 1918, the last living Carolina parakeet died in captivity. The species was once common in the eastern United States, but it suffered from habitat loss. So humans also hunted the species because parakeets ate orchard fruit when humans destroyed their native foods to make way for farmland. So this week, our case study will focus on the loss of bird species in North America. And I hope that we can sort of all relate to this. And so when you're outside, imagine what it might have sounded like prior to human colonization, when there was a lot more bird species available. So I want you to read on about the value of biodiversity and preserving biodiversity on your own and delve into the discussion this week. I wish you all a very, very good week. So take care of yourself, and I will see you next week.